There was a sound that used to mean magic was happening. That mechanical whir, followed by the slow ejection of a white square. Then the waiting, the shaking, the watching as colors bloomed across the surface like a developing dream. I remember this. You probably do too. Polaroid cameras were everywhere in the 70s and 80s. Birthday parties, graduations, family vacations. The instant gratification before instant gratification was even a phrase. You took a picture, and 90 seconds later, you held a photograph in your hands. No darkroom, no waiting a week for prints, just pure, immediate wonder. At its peak in 1977, Polaroid sold more cameras than anyone else in America. They controlled 80% of the instant photography market. Their revenue hit $1.4 billion. The company seemed unstoppable, revolutionary, permanent. So, what happened to Polaroid? To understand what we lost, you have to understand what Polaroid was at its peak. This was not just a camera company. This was cultural phenomenon. In 1977, the SX71 Step became the best-selling camera in America. Walk into any Sears, any department store, any camera shop, and there it was. Sleek, folding, revolutionary. But the real magic was not in the camera itself. It was in watching that blank white square transform before your eyes. Andy Warhol called his Polaroid camera his pencil and paper. He shot over 130,000 Polaroids between 1970 and 1987. Artists, celebrities, families, everyone was captivated by the same thing. Immediate results. No waiting. No wondering if the shot worked. The satisfaction was instant and complete. Edwin Land, Polaroid's founder, had created something that felt like actual magic. You pressed a button, and 90 seconds later, reality was captured and handed back to you. Kids would crowd around, watching the image slowly appear. Adults would shake the photos, even though you were not supposed to because the anticipation was almost unbearable. Polaroid was not selling cameras. They were selling moments. They were selling the ability to freeze time and hold it in your hands while the memory was still warm. Next week, I have another story for you that I think you are going to find just as fascinating. Subscribe so you do not miss it. By 1977, Polaroid employed over 20,000 people. Their Cambridge headquarters was a monument to American innovation. Engineers, chemists, optical specialists, all working to perfect this magical intersection of chemistry and mechanics. The company held over 5,000 patents. They had more PhD scientists per capita than Bell Labs. This was serious technology disguised as consumer fun, and the world could not get enough of it. Here is what nobody talks about. Polaroid was not really a camera company. They were a film company that happened to make cameras. The business model was brilliant and ruthless. They sold cameras cheap, sometimes at a loss. But every picture you took required their film. $8 to $12 for a pack of 10 photos in 1980s money. That is roughly $25 today. Per pack. The film cost them under $2 to manufacture. That is a profit margin that would make drug companies jealous. Edwin Land understood something fundamental about human behavior. Once you owned a Polaroid camera, you were locked into their ecosystem forever. No one else could make film for their cameras. No generic alternatives, no competition. You wanted to take pictures? You bought Polaroid film, period. This razor and blades model generated 70% of their profits. At peak, they were selling over $2 billion worth of film annually. The cameras were just the delivery mechanism for their real product. Those little white cartridges filled with chemicals and dreams. The company protected this monopoly fiercely. They held patents on every aspect of instant photography. The cameras, the film, the chemical processes, the development timing, everything. When Kodak tried to enter the market in the mid-70s with their own instant cameras, Polaroid sued immediately. The legal battle lasted 14 years and ended with Kodak paying $925 million in damages. At the time, it was the largest patent infringement settlement in United States history. Kodak was forced to destroy 16 million cameras and exit the instant photography market permanently. The victory seemed to prove that Polaroid was untouchable. They had built the perfect business, an innovative product protected by an impenetrable wall of patents and powered by recurring revenue that customers happily paid because the experience was irreplaceable. But that same wall that kept competitors out would eventually keep Polaroid in. Do you remember Polaroid? What is your memory? The first crack appeared in 1977, the same year Polaroid reached its peak. Edwin Land had spent $500 million developing something called Polavision. Instant movies. You could record a few minutes of footage and watch it immediately on a special viewer. No processing, no waiting, just instant home movies. It seemed like the logical next step. If instant photos were magical, instant movies would be revolutionary. Land was convinced this would be Polaroid's future. The problem was timing. Polavision launched just as Sony released Betamax and JVC introduced VHS. While Polaroid offered short, silent films that required a special viewer, Sony and JVC offered hours of recording that played on your television. You could watch real movies, record television shows, create lasting family memories. Polavision felt immediately obsolete. The company sold only 90,000 units before discontinuing the product in 1979. Land had bet the company's future on the wrong technology. The failure was personal for him. This had been his baby, his vision of where photography was heading. The board of directors, frustrated by the massive investment and tiny returns, began questioning Land's leadership for the first time in his 43-year tenure. The signs were there. They always are. While Polaroid was perfecting instant film, other companies were exploring entirely different approaches to photography. In 1981, Sony released the Mavica electronic still camera. The images were stored electronically, not on film at all. Most people dismissed it as a novelty. The image quality was poor, the cameras were expensive, and you needed a television to view the pictures. But a few engineers at companies like Canon and Nikon saw something else. They saw the beginning of the end for film photography entirely. Polaroid's leadership, drunk on their legal victory over Kodak and their continued film sales, missed the warning signs. CEO McAllister Booth would later dismiss digital photography as a flash in the pan. The company that had revolutionized instant gratification was about to be blindsided by technology that made their entire business model obsolete. The decline, when it came, was swift and merciless. By 1990, Kodak had demonstrated a 1.4 megapixel digital camera. The image quality was still poor by today's standards, but the trajectory was clear. Every year, digital cameras got better and cheaper. Every year, fewer people needed instant film. Polaroid's revenue peaked at $3 billion in 1991. Then the bottom fell out. By 2000, revenue had collapsed to $1.8 billion. Instant camera sales dropped 70% as digital cameras finally became affordable for regular families. The same families who had once crowded around Polaroid photos were now buying $500 digital cameras that could take hundreds of pictures without any film at all. The layoffs began in 1995. First a few hundred employees, then a few thousand. Between 1995 and 2000, Polaroid cut 8,000 jobs. These were not just numbers on a spreadsheet. These were chemists who had spent decades perfecting film formulas, engineers who understood optical systems better than almost anyone in the world, factory workers whose families had been with Polaroid for generations, all of them victims of a technology shift that their own leadership had refused to acknowledge. Polaroid tried to pivot to digital markets, but their attempts felt desperate and half-hearted. The PDC 2000 digital camera launched in 1996. It was expensive, clunky, and arrived years after competitors had established themselves in the market. Canon, Nikon, and emerging companies like Digital were already racing toward the future while Polaroid was still trying to figure out how to join the race. The company that had once defined innovation was now scrambling to copy everyone else. And this is the pattern I keep seeing. Whether it is a company, a city, or an invention, The same expertise that makes something successful can become the trap that destroys it. Polaroid's deep knowledge of chemistry and optics was useless in a world moving toward digital sensors and software. Their patents meant nothing when the entire category they protected was disappearing. Their loyal customers were aging out, and young people saw instant cameras as relics from their parents' generation. The end came on October 12, 2001. Polaroid filed for bankruptcy with $950 million in debt. 72 years of American innovation, reduced to legal documents and liquidation sales. The last manufacturing facility in Waltham, Massachusetts, had been the heart of instant photography for decades. Workers there had mixed the chemicals, assembled the cameras, and packed the film that had captured millions of family memories. When it closed in 2009, there were still a few dozen employees left. People who had spent their entire careers perfecting the magic of instant photography. They turned off the machines for the last time, packed up equipment that no one else in the world knew how to operate, and walked away from a technology that would never be manufactured again. The final film production run happened in 2008. The last cartridges rolled off the assembly line and into boxes that would sit in warehouses until they expired. When those ran out, that would be it. No more instant film. Ever. Millions of Polaroid cameras around the world would become expensive paperweights. The irony was crushing. In an age where everyone carried a camera in their phone, where you could take unlimited photos and share them instantly with the world, the simple magic of holding a physical photograph in your hands was disappearing forever. The brand was sold and resold multiple times during bankruptcy. Various companies bought the Polaroid name and tried to slap it on digital cameras, printers, and tablets. But it was just a logo now, divorced from any real innovation or purpose. The new products were generic electronics with a nostalgic sticker. And that is the part that still gets me. Polaroid was not just a company that made cameras. It was a company that made memories physical. Every Polaroid photo was unique, imperfect, irreplaceable. You could not just print another copy if you lost it. That scarcity, that physical reality, was part of what made those moments precious. When Polaroid died, something irreplaceable died with it. The ritual of taking an instant photo, the anticipation of watching it develop, the satisfaction of holding an actual print. All of it gone, seemingly forever. But here's the thing about stories like this. Sometimes they do not end where you think they do. On February 26, 2008, 48 hours before the last Polaroid film factory in Enschede, Netherlands, was scheduled for demolition, an Austrian entrepreneur named Florian Kaps bought it. He had no background in chemistry, no experience manufacturing film. He just believed that instant photography was too important to let die. Kaps and 10 former Polaroid employees called themselves the Impossible Project, and impossible seemed like the right word. Polaroid had destroyed all their chemical formulas during bankruptcy. Kaps and his team had to reverse engineer 70 years of chemistry from scratch. It took 3 years and $25 million to create new film that worked in old cameras. The chemistry was different, the colors slightly off, but it worked. Young people who had never experienced instant photography discovered it through the Impossible Project. Generation Z and millennials, raised on digital perfection, fell in love with the unpredictability and physicality of instant film. The imperfections became features, not bugs. By 2020, the company was selling over 10 million packs of film annually. 70% of their customers were under 35. Artists like Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish featured Polaroids in their work. Instagram built an entire platform around square photos and vintage filters, directly inspired by Polaroid aesthetics. The brand that had seemed dead forever was somehow alive again. Could Polaroid have survived if they had embraced digital earlier? Honestly, I think so. But it would have required the one thing their leadership refused to do: change. Instead, a small group of passionate people had to rescue instant photography from the graveyard of discontinued technologies and rebuild it from memory. Today, when you buy a Polaroid camera, you are buying something that was literally impossible just 15 years ago. The magic is back, imperfect and wonderful as ever. Subscribe to Arthur Lee's Adventures for more stories about the brands and places that shaped our world. And let me know in the comments, do you remember your first Polaroid? I would love to hear your story. Remember, this video is for educational purposes only. Always do your own research.